Metal Gear Solid is a game unlike any other, blending 90s blockbuster action perfectly with a story that delves into deeper questions of self and what dictates a person's actions, all delivered on two PlayStation 1 discs at a time when for most video games were just that. They were games. They were just games. To call it ambitious is an understatement, and its effect on my life and how I appreciate gaming in general is nothing short of extraordinary. So in one of my more beloved annual gaming rituals, we recently sat back down and played through Metal Gear Solid 1 on the PlayStation 1 again on stream. Check out the links in the description below for those highlights because it was a blast even now in 2019. And in this video, I'm going to try and condense what made this game so amazing into words. Not so much for the industry because that's been revisited and rehashed a million times. It's a beloved classic by many. But what made it so important for me? So grab your hot cocoa and your fuzzy slippers because we're diving right into this nostalgia trip. Guys, Metal Gear Solid was released in the fuzzy area of my brain somewhere between Crash Bandicoot coming out and Final Fantasy X on the PlayStation 2. That whole era is just like a mess of timelines that don't make any sense. I was a kid. I look back, I'm like, I don't know, when did it come out? I was a kid. I don't know. I look back, I struggle with timelines at that era of my life. Everything seems to just be jumbled together. I was just playing video games. But I remember playing that demo before the game came out. I played the demo over and over again. I could not wait to own a full copy. It was just so engrossing. I couldn't put it down, which is funny because I owned a lot of video games at the time, like full copies of video games, and I was playing this demo constantly. I mean, it's actually shocking to me how fun it is for kind of an action game. It's a stealth action game because it was based on the original PlayStation 1 controller. It didn't have, the DualShock isn't the right word because the PS2 is in where the DualShock came into play, but it didn't have the sticks. You didn't need them. They weren't part of the gameplay. So for a game that lets you do so much, it was interesting that there were so few buttons to do with. A lot of it's based on positioning, where are you in relation to the thing that you're interacting with, if it's an enemy, direction of movement. It's almost like a simplistic fighting game. I mean, think about with the few buttons that we had available to us, you can use items, you can use weapons, you can punch and kick, you can throw soldiers, you can grab and break people's necks, and that's not even talking about the different ways that you can interact with the environment. I mean, with so much complexity, stuff worked that you didn't really think would work. Whether that was, throwing a soldier into other soldiers, throwing a soldier into water, watching them realistically get hit, environmental interaction. It sounds so simple today because we're so used to modern technology and the crazy things that games are capable of, but this was the PlayStation 1. Things would drift through each other. You couldn't even interact with most of the stuff. It's crazy. Think about the different ways that you can interact with the environment in this game. Soldiers following footprints that you left, cigarette smoke revealing, hidden tripwires, electric tripwires, sounds changing depending on what surface you're walking on, and the environment, the enemies in that environment reacting appropriately. If you're on a softer surface, they were like, I don't know, I don't really hear anything. All of a sudden you're on a grate and you're like, what was that noise? What was that noise? This is all like really impressive for the time and awesome to see, and it made you feel more a part of the game world. It was part of that aspect of immersion that was so crucial, because immersion is one of the biggest parts for me in games, and this was one of the first games that really delivered immersion in a way I'd never seen before. And much of that magic about how you feel immersed in that world is that it doesn't really tell you about any of this, which makes it feel more natural. I think it's like the first one especially, but all of the Metal Gear games, all the options for how you can approach the game, approach challenges, approach an environment are astounding. And you can easily go through the entire game, for instance, never finding use for the cigarettes that you have in your pocket the entire time, and solve all the problems that the cigarettes could help you with in other, probably better ways. Similarly, there, are realistically only a few places in the game, if even any, outside of that first snowy area, where there are guards, there's snow, you can leave footprints, and the guards are in a place where they could follow those footprints. But the patrolling guards, if they encounter that scenario, will follow them. If all those stars align, they will follow footprints and come find you. That's probably a lot of development work for very little payout. It's those kind of details that help this game rise above its competitors against other games in the industry and really shine as this truly special game, because it had all these fine-tuned details that realistically didn't matter at all. If you think about it, if that first area is one of the only places that footprints come into play, why? Why go through all the effort? Think about all the places they could have taken a shortcut. Take cigarettes out, make them part of the story, but you never really have to use them, or make it a cutscene. so you can't actually use the cigarette and the smoke kind of wafts out and then shows the laser wires. But they do it in a less gamey way. Not really a bad way to approach it. I don't think anyone would have looked down upon the game and be like, why can't I really use those cigarettes? Or the ketchup bottle. What if that, when they were developing the whole like I'm trapped in the cell situation, they give you the ketchup bottle and if you go to use it, it just kind of describes what happens instead of like you lie down, the ketchup spreads out. I mean, it's silly, but it's those little things like you get one ketchup bottle in this whole game and you can use it one time to do this one thing. But that is what made it so special. All those things, it made me feel like I could do anything, which of course you can't. In fact, it's a PlayStation 1 game, you can do very little. But it was an illusion, but it made me feel like any action I could think of, I could do. And no other game I'd played at that time made me feel that way, and it was awesome. But in a game like this, gameplay will only get you so far. It's not going to push you into that realm of greatness. It's just going to make you a really fun game. Without a gripping narrative to pull it all together, it's essentially just like a stealth minigame over and over again, each room presenting a new stealth or combat challenge. It really would have been kind of similar to, was it Metal Gear VR? Luckily, as is well known by now, in this area, Metal Gear Solid did not disappoint. If you watch the short clip, you don't even have to watch it. It's a short clip. If you don't click anything on the home screen, you wait like 10 seconds. The video loans of sort of like the before the game starts actions and conversations and a few things that happen. I don't you don't have to watch it at all. It's like some crucial backstory stuff going on and you can skip it entirely. But if you do watch it, the first time around you're immediately made aware that this game is going to be a little different without us telling its story, at least in terms of games that were out, in 1998, that era of gaming. It seems like the opening of a 90s blockbuster movie, like we were talking about before. It's this intense exposition delivered with fantastic voice acting. And good voice acting was still relatively new for games at that time, especially console games. Maybe a few PC games had branched into it. I think Half-Life also came out in 1998, and that had some crazy good voice acting and storytelling. At least I remember it as good. Maybe it wasn't as good as I remember it. But I hadn't played Half-Life then. I didn't have a computer that could play it. The point is, do you realize how ridiculous it is as a 10-year-old that I knew the name David Hayter? The man's a legend. I was 10. I don't know names now. How did I know that name then? I was like, who does the voice of Solid Snake? I want to find every work he's ever done. As a 10-year-old? As me? No, I don't do that stuff. That's not me. But I did. Anyway, so Metal Gear is delivering this realistic backstory of black ops, elite military squads, just a taste of pseudoscience that seems like it could practically be real. You're like, is that real? I don't know. Nanomachines, Soliton radar, genetic modification, Fox died! Everything was delivered with an explanation of what it was based on in real life. Theoretical or slightly skewed technology that the player could kind of immediately accept. And when they go into like a 5-minute explanation of how the Soliton radar system works with like the salts in your body and the code, you're like, okay, sure. Why would you talk about it for 5 minutes if you're just making it up? It must be true. Because like in a movie where every second is critical, they'll stop for a minute and they'll just throw an offhanded line. They're like, yes, we used unobtainium to make that work, and it can only work with unobtainium. You're like, whatever, I'm sure that's fake. But in a game, pacing is important, but you've got a little more time to work with, so you can have a 4-minute conversation with Mei Ling about how the Soliton radar system is actually working in the environment. You're like, and they revisit it constantly, almost as a game mechanic. When it doesn't work, when they don't want you to have it, they're like, sorry, the spaces are too tight. It doesn't really work bouncing off the walls in that kind of way. And you're like, okay, I'm sorry, there's a lot of magnetic interference in that area. Your radar system's not going to work. And we're like, right, because you explained exactly how it works. That makes perfect sense. Of course, I believe you. And of course, like I said, I was like 10, so I bought into it immediately. All you really have to say is like, it's a secret government tech, and I would have been like, I'm with you. But they went into the background of essentially how it could be real, like how this, with a step further with technology that we know today, it could be actively accurate at a personnel level. They would take technology that worked on like a grand scale with like a radar dish, and they'd be like, yeah, you can make this for a person, sure. I love that shit. I love when they dive into, not in Metal Gear Solid, but in media in general, books, movies, everything. I love when they make it real. They force it to be real in the context of whatever you're watching or playing, and you're just like, yes, I'm with you. It sucks you in. But they didn't stop with just the science, but also with the topics that the game touches on. Nuclear waste, military conflict, historical incidents, everything that Metal Gear Solid invented It tied into real world events. It tied into real challenges, real people, real things that had happened. Often it used real footage, which again in video games just felt so weird. People were laughing at me because I was in the stream. I kept saying like, this was like real footage they had in this game. And they're like, dude, it was a PlayStation 1 disc. Of course it could be real footage. But I was like, guys, it was 1998. The games that I was playing at that time were games like Pokemon, Super Mario 64, Wave Race, like that kind of stuff. And then all of a sudden you've got this real footage of like an actual event. And I was like, what the hell? Now a couple games have kind of dabbled into it, like Road Rash had that intro with like some sort of real footage. And Tony Hawk Pro Skater, I think, had some real footage at the beginning before you started playing the game, but it didn't. That's not the point. This had real footage of real world events and like news stories. So you're like, we're being serious. My parents watch the news. This is serious. So they give you this foundation for the story of the game that they ground it in reality so intensely, expertly incorporating an overabundance of real facts, most of which don't matter for the story at all. And they hit you with these examples and real footage and historical timelines, stuff that you could go out and research and find and be like, wow, that was real stuff. They're not making this up. And then taking elements just a little outside of reality, they stretch the world just a little bit bigger, added an event that could never happen, like Big Boss in Outer Heaven, but it's a believable story of like a terrorist trying to start something up, and suddenly the whole world is real. And once you're hooked, they throw you right off the edge, because quickly Metal Gear dives in this world of cybernetic ninjas, minigun-toting shaman from Alaska, and straight up psychic powers. But at that point, you're invested. You're in it to win it. You believe everything this game is saying. In the context of Shadow Moses, anything can happen, and you're okay with it. So it just feels normal. Blockbuster action movies do this a little bit too, where they think things like a little bit too far, and you're like, okay, I guess he could survive that fall. But it always, as you're watching it, you're kind of like, I don't know, that doesn't, because it's a real person. For some reason, like video games can get away with a little bit more. So when this video game then took all that reality and tried to force it into the game, tried to make it so grounded in real facts, once I believed it could take it so much further because it was a video game, if that makes sense. I was willing to give it a little bit more of an edge in terms of ridiculousness, because I'm like, right, yeah, we're playing a video game. I never forgot that. But it was now a video game that like I believed every word it was telling me. Because while they're doing all this crazy stuff with Psycho Mantis and Vulcan Raven, they're diving back into political cover-ups, espionage, betrayals, arms dealing, real life problems and real life challenges and real life like criminality. To again, every time you think you're like, oh, maybe we're going a little bit too far, they'd pull you back down to normalcy. Still with conflict, but with believable conflict. I'd never seen a game tackle so many adult topics, and as a 10 or 11-year-old, it was also some of the more complex story elements I'd been exposed to at that point. I mean, I wasn't like a sheltered child. I'd watched a lot of movies that probably are not appropriate for a 10-year-old, but I turned out great, so maybe they are. I was so engrossed. It had me from beginning to end. I could not stop. And because it was a game I was playing, unlike a few lines in a movie about government policy and reaction and like the kind of thing that you know you can ignore when you're watching Jurassic Park and somebody says like, oh, well, the government, blah, 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 blah. I'm like, right. But in a game, I guess every line felt like it could be important for like my next actions and what was going to come next. And I felt like I had to understand the whole story. It's just different somehow. So I paid attention so closely to every single line. Every conversation could have a clue to my next direction, and conversations were delivered expertly. Which brings me to my next point, because technology of the time was obviously limited. So cutscenes as we know them today didn't really exist. That's not to say there weren't some amazing cutscenes in Metal Gear Solid. There were. But facial expressions just didn't happen. Everybody's seen the like blocky, face of Solid Snake that people like dress up as when they're trying to be funny. Like, look, I'm PS1 Solid Snake. But that was it. You couldn't even move the pixels to make him like smile. Enter the codec. The codec merged this in-game need and storytelling need for like a remote communication. Like he's got support off-site, so they've got to talk. And also a technical need in the game to give characters more expression and more life. Again, this is a time when games struggled to find a way to deliver emotion outside of dialogue or text. Zelda Ocarina of Time would come out this same year with like very sharply changing facial expressions on. I'm thinking of like young Zelda when she's talking about Ganondorf. She's like, her face is so intense because they could only really have 2 or 3 expressions for everybody: bland, super sad, and super happy. They have all those faces for young Zelda, actually, now I'm thinking about it. But that was a full text-based game. When you add those believable faces and then have the level of voice acting that Metal Gear Solid delivered, it opened up the characters immensely. So between all the elements, these action-loaded cutscenes that, just in terms of pure motion and what they were doing, with like the tank firing at Snake and he's flipping over backwards, with, I will say it, impressive graphics for the time. I mean, that was a believable high D. It was the PS1. I was like, cool, it's a helicopter. And then you add in these codec visuals that really are drawing in on the personalities of these individuals with the incredible voice acting, tying it all together. It could just tell a story in ways that I had not seen before, and it blew me away. Now, I'm not comparing Metal Gear Solid to other games that I may not have played that I'm sure somebody's going to be like, hey, somebody else, some other game did this before Metal Gear Solid. I'm sure it did. But if nothing else, Metal Gear Solid, it was a game that showed me how far storytelling in games could go, how open-ended challenges could be, how much characters could stick with you long after the credits had rolled, and you just kept thinking about them and the actions that they took and how they felt. And it gave an experience far different from Zelda, Pokemon, Crash Bandicoot, Twisted Metal. I mean, these were amazing games, but this wasn't a level to beat, or even in the case of Zelda, like a fantasy world to explore. These were real-life topics with real people behind them, and it was fun. It was so much fun. It blew my mind as a child, and it continues to blow my mind to this day. I love this game. It's a great game. But I want to hear about your experiences. Were you as excited about what Metal Gear delivered as I was, or did it push you away? Was it too much? Was it too much in any direction? I don't know. There could be plenty of people that didn't like it. Let me know in the comments if you want to see more nostalgic throwbacks like this, both in stream and in videos like this one, because I really enjoy doing both. As I mentioned below, check out the description below for the full links to the highlight videos of the entire Metal Gear Solid stream on Twitch. It was a blast. I can't wait to do something similar like it again sometime soon. I don't know when. Otherwise, guys, check back every Saturday for new videos like this, and I'll see you guys all in the next one. Peace. Thanks for watching. If you're interested in more videos like this, think about subscribing. And if you already have, don't forget to click that little bell next to the sub button to get notified when new videos go live. Hit me up in the comments with your thoughts on this video, or come hang out and chat with me on Twitch every Tuesday night at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And definitely look me up on Twitter or Instagram and Hunt for Games to keep up with what else I've got going on. See ya.